It's about balance.
About balance, exactly. Mate, we'll get going, guys. I think we've got plenty on, and certainly enough to kick on and get moving. So just as an intro to everyone, Fletch, you've disappeared. I don't know if you've done that deliberately.
Apologies.
Here he is. I thought you were going to do a Superman or Clark Kent and just appear in your England kit.
That's what he wanted, though, wasn't it? He said, "Oh, can I have a real big intro? I'll turn my thing off. You build it up a bit. You get them excited, and I'll just like reveal."
I thought he was going to stand there in his full England kit, say, "Eddie, I'm ready." I'm ready.
I just pressed one button.
This brings us back to it's our third episode so far in the Sedbergh webinar stuff. And this is built out of how successful the first webinar was with the discussion around talent and everything around there. And we'll delve into sort of the crux of the conversation and the main conversation as we go on. But I think just to bring a bit of structure to it, I think what better time to sort of have just a little recap and a little discussion on Six Nations stuff. So I've got some quick fire questions for you both around the Six Nations. Relegation. Do we put Italy out of the misery? Do we let them go and bring someone else in? What's your immediate thoughts on that, Rusty?
It gives Fletch more days' work because he does a bit of stuff with Georgia, although he is also King of Italy. So would I bring it in? I would bring in a playoff, yes.
Yeah, cool.
I'm really in favour of relegation. I mean, I would have, I mean, Fletch probably disagree on this, but I would have relegation in and out of the Prem as well.
Oh, you would?
Yeah.
Oh, I would be totally different. I'd want to ring fence the Premiership so I could see more teams throwing the ball around a little bit and not worrying about kicking the
Right, there's some
penalties.
teams near the top that aren't going to get relegated and they're still kicking the ball.
I want to see bums on seats. I want to see people being entertained. Take me back to the gladiator days in the Colosseum. Chuck it around.
I mean, I would be opposite. I think I don't know any successful minority sport that has promotion and relegation. I mean, we need to have a franchise model and we need to invest in the game and stop wasting lots and lots of money, and we might change some sort of mindsets a bit. I don't think our game is big enough to have promotion relegation. It's a historical thing that's anchoring us down a little bit. Would I have it in Six Nations? I'd probably have a period of review where you actually do some form of systematic review based upon lots of stuff. Georgia doesn't have it's not a professional sport in Georgia. So Georgia don't have the infrastructure. So all of their good players, like or none, play in France or they play elsewhere in the country. So actually, I think there's some stuff needs to shift if it is going to be Georgia, and Georgia are by far the best next team. But I do think in a period of time it needs to be reviewed, and then it needs to be reviewed in a period of time. I wouldn't have promotion relegation. I don't think it's the Italian Federation would go bankrupt if they got relegated, and that would be the end of professional rugby in Italy, I guess. Which would be
if Simon Vickers is on, he's etching. He's sort of like plugging Lithuania.
Yeah, I wasn't considering the economics of it, and all I could think about with Fletcher is that story where they made you drink a drink in Georgia.
Oh yeah, man, I nearly died because anyway. But it's I do think Italy so one of our last games together was against a really strong Italian side, and lots of their players are coming through. So their Italian youth side was starting to beat the home unions. Now clearly there's a massive gap between being successful as an age group team and then being successful as a senior team. And there's no, there's not to say that that's going to go well, but I do think they're starting to get it together a bit. However, I would have, let's have a review next year and let's have one in 3 years' time. And yeah, let's look to see if they're interesting enough. Last 3 times Italy have played Georgia, they beat them. So Georgia also aren't that competitive compared to the big unions.
Yeah, fair play, fair point. We won't get too political. I think you have definitely sat on the fence a little bit. No, you haven't. Let's just keep it as the 6 and we'll march on. Who was your player of the weekend? Who stood out for you guys?
I like a bit of Hamish Watson. I didn't realise he was at Leicester Academy. That's fascinating me. Fletcher would know him. He was at Oakham School and played with Charlie Morgan's brother. And I like a good little one. I think
he's a machine.
He's pretty effective, and I wonder, like, it's interesting, isn't it, how emotional the Celts can get against England, and sometimes we can't quite get our emotion to that level.
Yeah, Fletch, anyone stand out for you?
Yeah, you may be talking about him, but DuPont, I thought, is like, he's just a Rolls Royce. Just in terms of his decision making, I think you see in a game, or a different game to most people on the pitch. And I'm a huge fan of Teddy Thomas. So I just love the way he plays. He's got a bit of a swagger. He plays with a big smile on his face. He can do some stuff that other people aren't even trying. So they would be my two highlights. Yeah, I mean, I did enjoy this Scottish back row. I thought they were magnificent across, well, all of them really. So
yeah, go back to your Frenchies though. How do you coach them boys? Because I noticed that. Well, I only noticed it when you said Teddy Thomas, and he was like smiling all the way through the weekend. Fair enough, France were on the front foot. It was fairly cash run out for those boys. But how do you sort of even think about coaching those boys? How do they get better?
Yeah, mate, it's a good shout. If you come on Wednesday, we're doing the French Revolution on the Magic Academy.
I'm not signing, but I'm signing.
Where we're going to analyse the French game and just have a look at a bit of that. Look, I think what the French have done really well, and we'll talk about on Wednesday, is to sort of just take a long look at themselves and sort of try and be a bit more French. I think for a long time they were influenced by sort of the Anglo-Saxon type stuff and maybe the Southern Hemisphere type stuff, and they kind of lost their way a bit. So I think they've had a big hard look. They've taken the best bits out of their culture and the stuff that they think's important, and I'm sure they've sort of looked at some other environments and said, look, we'll actually take that. So Sean Edwards is a smart addition to their coaching team. He would add value to probably an area of the game that the French haven't done as well at. But yeah, mate, I think it's been a lot of the structural stuff, and it's just been allowed to let people breathe. Johnny was talking about it, wasn't he? I think you sort of sent something on Twitter just about trying to get the best out of people, get people in their flow state type stuff. And I think that's what the French have done.
I can't believe the Stig has been onto YouTube to plug your own webinars on the Sedbergh one. Get in, lads. You've got some good numbers on the Sedbergh webinar.
I see Phil Llewellyn's in the chat box. Phil Llewellyn will probably have Antoine Dupont on his next podcast as well, because he's claiming we're taking people. And then Duff's, who was your favourite player? Was it Cameron Redpath?
Oh, mate, you're beating me to it. No, I obviously looked out for Cam. And I thought he did really, really well. My prediction for that game was Scotland will win. I just thought they'd get the nudge on, or they'll just get steady control at the breakdown. I said Scotland win, and I'd hoped for Cam to have a rock-solid 7.5 out of 10. Good debut, in which I thought could have been a right baptism of fire. So, yeah, no, I watched Cam. I thought we and Fletch were speaking about it this morning. Really good first half, involved lots. And the comparison between, because I used to coach a little bit with Olly Morris, and the sort of comparison between them both, that's it. Nudge. It took him 65 minutes to get his hands on a ball. And Redpath, I saw he had like 4 or 5 touches in the first 10 minutes, getting into the game, getting a feel for it. And I was chuffed for him. I thought he played really well. But I thought Stuart Hogg was phenomenal.
His kicks, Fletcher's been out in the garden with the lads, practicing spiral run kicks or whatever he calls them.
Spiral on the run.
Yeah. So we couldn't have you two boys on my last one on the Six Nations. Oh, I've got 2 actually. Billy Burns. Do we put our arm around him or do we give him a kick?
I mean, Billy would be devastated. It was a big moment in the game, and it's what you practice for. I mean, that's typical Billy Burns. So Billy Burns was going for 5 meters. Like that's his attitude. I think he's a 9 out of 10 kicker. So I don't think he'll miss again. But I love the fact that he was going for it. That is his spirit and his attitude. Billy will bounce back quick. He'd be absolutely devastated. I know him reasonably well. His character is that he's sort of all or nothing kind of guy. But he bounce back. He'll put it behind him. He's a chicky chappy, and he'll sort of, he'll take it on the chin and he'll come back better. But the chances are, mate, next time he'll do the same and nail it.
Mate, there was a great picture after it with Sexton and him just having a chat. Sexton had his arm around him. It's like, you'll be fine, crack on, you'll be all right. But it was one of many big moments in that game.
I'm glad we didn't play in the social media age. That's what it made me think. I wouldn't want to be seeing the stuff that Billy Burns is probably deleting his Twitter account if he's got one.
Yeah, good point, mate. You can't do anything. You can't do anything now. And then Rusty Fletch, come on, a couple of minutes on thoughts on the Red Rose, the mighty Englishmen. They're going to win the Six Nations. They're going to Grand Slam it. Well, not anymore. Initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think they've still got a chance of winning it. I'd be surprised if a team goes through unbeaten. England might have sort of had their game. It was a poor performance. I think we'd seen not the writing on the wall, but we've seen the direction that England are heading around. They hold high value to sort of kick and territory and competing in the air and what that's going to sort of allow them to get. And to be fair to the Scots, England were off a little bit with the quality of their kicks. They got hassled a bit. It's actually in the box around the offside. I don't know if people noticed, but normally Scotland play really quick. Ali Price is on the ball and so on. And I loved how he deliberately, so he didn't dummy it, he just delayed the pass and caught England offside 3 times. I'm curious to why he took 3. I think Scotland was smart around the breakdown a bit. I think they encouraged Marrow to go for stuff. I do think they were using deception, and I thought they were creative around sort of England not being that well disciplined. That's the stuff I noticed. But look, England, I'm sure will bounce back. They got Italy this week. However, from an English point of view, I just want to see them sort of use the ball a little bit more and go and sort of try and build pressure in different ways other than just kicking.
Rusty, anything in addition or?
Come on, Rusty. What are you thinking?
Fletch, you're a disgrace. What do I think? I'll be really curious about their conversations this week and who's having them. So I think that it's a team led by, you can see who leads the team, and I wonder whether they'll be kind of leading that stuff as opposed to some others. So I'll be interested to see what Max Malins or Ben Earl or people like that think. I think that would be interesting. The reality is we've got to evolve our game. We've got to have different ways of winning a game of rugby, and we'll learn a lot from that game. I still think there's a high chance we'll win the Six Nations.
If you had to make one change, one person, one magic academy, magic wand, one wish, who would it be?
John Fletcher at playmaker at 12. All playing 12.
It'd be a gain line, getting over the gain line these days.
Look, I would love to see Marcus Smith at international rugby. I'd love to see him, being given that opportunity to play. Probably Faz and Ford, like in the squad around him a bit. Faz might push to 12, maybe 40 on the bench. Who knows? But I do think the stuff that Smith's produced over the last 2 or 3 weeks, he'd probably add in, if I was loud enough, one Don Brandt. I think the back row, or Sam Simmons, and I'm not just jumping on the bandwagon. I mean, he's just so powerful and so quick. And the game, the game's about speed, I think. I think he would add in.
Would you have Harry Randall in?
I'll be honest. If they're going to play how they're playing, I wouldn't have Robson or Randall. I'd probably get somebody else back in, to be perfectly honest. But
Wigglesworth.
If your intent is to speed the game up, then I think Randall's and Robson are the guys, as is Danny Kerr. I think Danny Kerr's form over the last 2 weeks has been quite exceptional. But I would like to think, with an eye on the World Cup, that Randall's going to get an opportunity. He needs, Eddie needs to be blooding some players, giving them some opportunities. And I know we want to win this, but I think we'd all rather win a World Cup in 3 or 4 years' time, or whenever the hell it is. So.
Fletch, and definitely interested in both of you, actually. What do you think the purpose of the England team is? Is it just to win games, or is it also to inspire and entertain? And
I think it's like how you win a bit. I would want to see a bit more. I mean, I might be out on a limb, but I like, and it's just the way that I think is that. Actually, I ended up like sort of, that's pretty cool, Scotland. Like I wasn't supporting them, but I was like, oh mate, I was definitely, they were playing the better rugby that I was a bit more associated with. So yeah, I do. I think teams, I think sports in the entertainment business, I think you definitely are paid to win, but I think it's a question of how you win. I think it's important.
I think it's even more important now and how they win post-pandemic. So even when the community rugby clubs get up and running again, how do you get people tuning into the box to watch? How do you get people in stadiums watching? What's getting them on the feet, clapping, cheering, moving? And the England team have a real sort of opportunity to do that. I don't think they're geared up to do it. I think they're purely win. And somebody said it on the commentary. If England win 3-0, they'll be happy. I was like, you can't be serious.
Yeah, look, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I know you're just teasing, and I'm going to ask a question to you. Like, I actually think if England went in the game with a different mindset, I think our players are really skillful. They're really athletic, and I think we're capable of tearing teams apart, really. But I would actually, probably play the game a bit faster with the ball in hand a little bit more. Why? What about you, Rusty? What are you thinking?
Same. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Look at Quinn's, like the handbrake's off. And, 3 players you just mentioned, Kerr, Dunbrand, Marcus, are all killing it. They look like they've got smiles on their faces. They're showing what they're capable of. Like, it's a good nudge to coaches as to whether we're in the way or not.
Yeah. So we've got some good questions coming into the question box, and that has given me a good prompt. We'll steer it back onto some content from this evening, and then we will look at the chat box as we go through. So obviously we picked some areas that have come out of the first episode with us. So we're going to look at around mentoring versus coaching. Some mental skills and some positional stuff to bring out of the first one and into this sort of forum to have a discussion about. It'll be really beneficial if we see the questions and get them questions loaded into the chat box, but we'll definitely revisit some of there. I think Tim and Phil, Greg have just had some questions, so we'll jump back to them in a little bit. But if we just steer on to a little bit of mentoring stuff, mentoring versus coaching. Rusty, what's the difference? Is there a difference between mentoring and coaching?
Well, Fletch will tell me there is. So I think you're better off going to Fletch first. He's got like a definition of each of them. I know he has. For me, it would be pretty similar. It would be like helping people get better and meeting them where they are. And ideally, they're in charge of that, not me. But Fletch would have a way better answer than me. Come on, you got 2 definitions, haven't you?
No, I don't. Well, yeah. I mean, just because that's how my brain works, I would need to understand what it means to me. I mean, what's the biggest? I think they're really similar. I think very rarely will you go, "Oh, look, I am a mentor and I am mentoring, and I'm a coach and I am coaching." I think often you're doing a little bit of both, and you're doing some other stuff as well. I think probably the biggest difference that I hear people talk about, and I kind of agree a bit, is like mentoring. I think it's helped if you've done it and been there a bit. Coaching, I don't think it's as relevant, if I'm perfectly honest. Coaching is about trying to draw more stuff out of the other person. I often hear mentors talking about, "Oh, look, I've got some sort of knowledge and advice," and of course it's that sort of stuff around guiding them to answers also. But I think often what I hear people talk about the difference within mentoring is the mentor is often more experienced, often older. However, I think Russell will come back to, look, he mentors a number of people and he wouldn't be any of that. He would be that naive type expert. But that's what I hear. And I think a lot of people talk about.
I'll call it coaching from now on.
Yeah, just call it coaching.
Yeah, I'm not that fussed about the word, because I also think they have some quite unhelpful connotations. So a little bit like when Ugo said, like, put in the chat box now if you're a coach and what you do without mentioning the word coach, then that's the stuff I'm more interested in. I'm more interested in, like, what does this relationship look like? I think coach would often have quite a almost like a top down. I think all of the relationships that I'm involved in, and I'm sure it's the same for Fletch, work both ways. Like, I learn loads. Often I'm thinking, wow, like I learned way more than you learned then. So yeah, I think it's, and in some places I would have some stuff that's helpful, and other places I'm genuinely going, right, I'm really interested, I want to learn about this.
Yes, yeah, mate, I'd agree. I think often they're sort of blurred a bit, but I think the mentoring stuff is, to me, if a player sort of like phones up for some advice, like some stuff that I've seen with other people, or I might have some experiences around, I would say that more of a mentoring conversation. However, within that, I'm using coaching skills. I'm asking some.
Yeah, it's
asking
difficult.
some stuff.
So, what do you think the real sort of fundamentals of mentoring are? So, in terms of like, we're all in a position where we will have those relationships with players that do phone us and ask for advice. One for me would be sort of honesty. So, I think the person that you're in that relationship with will value sort of really truthful and honest feedback. But what are the sort of the fundamentals that you think make a real good relationship and mentor relationship work?
Oh, I've just thought a couple. I think it's important to do, like, and I'm going to call it contracting, but just to kind of like what do both parties want from it. Even like the call, often I go, look, like, what's the purpose of this call? What's it? I need to understand, like, what's the sort of endpoint type stuff. So I think that 2 ears, one mouth is a reasonable ratio, like, type stuff. I think real good listening skills, and definitely listen to. And then I think it's about creating options. That's what I've always thought around. It's not necessarily about giving them the answers, although often I will ask, do you want a yes or a no? Are you, because sometimes people ask those really close questions. So I think generally I would want to give options and let them come to some answers, give some sort of strategies around that. However, I'm more than happy to go, I think this. And I've done that a number of times, but only when they've pushed me. I wouldn't offer that early as a mentor.
Cool. Rusty, anything to add?
I've written trust. I love what Max Caldas says. The job of a coach is to build trust. They won't pick. It's easy. They won't pick the phone up to you if they don't trust you. It's about listening, which I'm definitely working on. But for me, more around the story behind the story. So I'm really enjoying the Bob Muir stuff we're doing on the Prof Doc around sense making, and that's something I'm trying to get better at. Questioning, as Fletch said, like signpost. Is this just a moan? Like, are we just going to have half an hour of moaning? Because I'm cool if we are, but or are we going to agree some stuff at the end of this conversation? And something that I always try and do with, I will get players that'll go, got some challenges, is agree, so what? So as Fletch said, let's create some options, and then let's actually get a bit more convergent at that point and go, look, well, one or two things have been helpful. Like, you don't have to, they don't even have to tell me now. So I had a cricket coach the other day, and he said, can I message you in 24 hours and just tell you what I think is going to be helpful? And he did, and that was helpful for him.
And sorry, Duff, I think that's a great point. Like, a reasonable high percentage of my time, it's just like, and it's not a vent, although sometimes it is a vent. It's just obviously they trust you, so there's that element of, I know this is not going any further, or, Fletch, Rusty, or anybody else would do the appropriate stuff around how sensitive this information is. And often talking it out, just verbalizing and listening to yourself. And also, and I know it's I actually just I think what I might do well with some people, probably a couple of people of my age, I just play back to them what I've heard them say. So I've just said, look, this is what I've just heard you say. And they'll go, well, I don't mean that. I go, well, that's what you've just said. Or that's how I've interpreted it, type stuff. So I do think that listening and then playing back is actually a really important skill, generally. And I think I do it quite well. There's a couple of people I used to work with who and it's cool, look, I've just got to get some stuff off my chest. And then I'll say, this is what I've heard. And they'll go, oh, right. But yeah, it's a good point from Rusty. I think Rusty does a bit better around, look, what's the one or two things? Let's sort of narrow this down.
I think Fletch does replaying it back really well, and I would often forget to do that. And someone put in the thing about empathy, and actually it was interesting. So I was in a webinar the other day, and they were speaking about some stuff, and I was like, well, where does trust fit in? And they were talking about empathic accuracy, and we just kind of say these words like they're really easy, like I'm terrible at empathy. I'm really working hard to be good at it. And Fletch and Waltz would be rock stars at it, and I've learned loads from them. And like, we just throw these comments away. Oh, yeah, there's trust and it's empathy. And I'm thinking, that's quite a big topic. Like, how do you build trust? How do you lose it? Like, it's this chemical reaction. What, is it different for different people? So I think we probably need to get more into that stuff and curious about it.
That's it, mate. I was watching some snippets and videos of Alex Sanderson at Sale for the first time the other day, and the thing he said about trust is that trust takes time. 28
minutes, Fletch, before he mentioned Sale.
Sando and Sale. But I think it's one of those things that can't be rushed, and I think sometimes we might be mentoring without realizing we're mentoring. And the big thing that I was revisiting some stuff today around some notes I had on it, and it was around the sort of benefits and sort of downfalls of informal, formal stuff. Fletch, you talk about that contractual bit, that buy into it and let's get some stuff down that we want to really discuss. But there's merit for both, right? There's merit for, them informal little catch-ups, hookups, chance meetings or planned meetings, to more formal stuff around these are the areas that I really need some support with.
Yeah, look, I mean, to me, the contracting's just like it's just stuff around purpose and like how we're going to behave type stuff. I do think, I mean, as you can imagine, most of my stuff's informal. But yeah, I think it would be useful. It doesn't have to be the first thing. It might actually be 3 or 4 times in. You go, oh, look, I actually think we just need to sort of agree some stuff. But yeah, I would probably do like a sort of a contracting piece. Just like, what do you want to get out of it? How do you want me to be, because if you're a mentor, you're there in service of them, really. You're there to support them. I know Rusty said, and you're absolutely right. I mean, mate, I've met some amazing people and I've learned loads. But actually, you're there to service them. So asking them exactly what they want out of it. Like even, this was a long time ago. I give somebody some feedback, and it was like as if and because we hadn't really agreed that actually I was going to call some stuff out, and I just called it out, and the person wasn't that happy. And I think if we'd done that contracting piece at the start to say, look, when do you want this stuff called out? Because my style would be to call it out kind of in the moment a bit. But that's the kind of stuff. It's kind of
last nudge on a Fletchism, but a question you ask a lot is like, what would be a good use of the next hour?
Yeah. I've had that a few times. Apart from the informal stuff, like he does make me wear a shirt and tie for phone calls usually. Let's get to business. I think Reese has just put a really good point in there, and Guy as well, and I'll get to Richards in a second. But it was around then. So we often talk about mentor has the experience and they've been around the block a bit, they know a bit. But we talk about mentoring within our clubs and our schools, and senior players taking the lead in mentoring younger players. What would be the 2 or 3 things that we'd consider probably more than most around making sure that we provide that senior player with the tools to mentor the juniors most? What would that look like?
Mate, if I was sports minister, that would be the first thing I would bring in, would be this young people helping other young people. And generally would be older to younger, but it's something we've done at the cricket club, and I know I've banged on a couple of times for me. It's just amazing. And I always tell a story like when Olly was in the nets with some kids and I was in the nets, and I knew what they would say, but I was like, playfully, which one of these do you think's the best coach? Now, I'm a much better coach than Olly, who's my eldest. He's pretty good, but like I would knock socks off him. And every single kid went Olly. And when I said why, and they just give me reasons that, like, oh, well, he's like, they just give me some, what were they talking? Oh, he's like, it's much more fun and all that. And it's just not true. It just wasn't true. I was smashing it. But that's, I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? But yeah, I think it's really important. I think schools could do a lot more of it. I know some schools do it. I think they play at it a bit. Clubs definitely play at it. To me, you should stay for your session. So you should run your session, stay, and then coach the other kids. So instead of an hour and a quarter, experience should be 2.5 hours. And I think it would develop them as players as well as obviously helping out coaching. There you go.
In a nutshell, from the new Sports Minister 2021. Phil just put that in the chat box.
Fletch would fit in nicely with the current Conservative government.
Rusty, we're not doing politics tonight. Have you got any thoughts around that mentoring in the sort of school arena?
Everything Fletch said, critical, useful skills, people for the rest of their lives. Would be really, really helpful.
Class. Well, listen, the chat box has gone really well there with some stuff coming back around some thoughts and some really good thoughts from a lot of people. If there's any questions around that mentoring versus coaching question, then just keep filtering it in. I'll keep an eye on it for now, but we'll probably move across around. There were some questions in episode 1 of the webinars around psychology and mental skills and how we prepare, along that talent pathway, how we prepare the children. It's like, for one, to perform, but two, to deal with stuff. Rusty, interesting, you mentioned social media before. There's nothing nobody can do now without, the world seeing it. There's a real opportunity of that. So what does mental skills or psychology around a talent development pathway sound like, feel like, look like for you guys?
Well, Fletcher ran one, so you should know the answer to this.
Fletcher should have a whole PowerPoint now.
I'm curious to
Rusty, by the way, I've noticed a pattern here.
Yeah, man, he just pushes everything on me and then he makes it like miles better.
What am I thinking?
Then he puts the sprinkles and the
and
cherry.
When you spoke about social media, so I remember one article in the Telegraph that Andy Robinson wrote, slagging me and Nathan Thomas off, and I can remember both of us going, that wasn't that helpful for us. And I dread to think how players find it now. So it was interesting, and maybe get a view on it, Fletch, because your son was in it. They did a next gen rugby 15 top 100 young players in the country. And I wonder how, what the view is on that. What do I think about it? I think it needs to be integrated. I think it needs to be put in there. Often it isn't. It's like a workshop somewhere else. I think there's some different aspects of it. So I probably, some of Aaron Walsh's stuff I tend to kind of see. So there's some well-being stuff, there's the environment, and then there's the performance under pressure. And I think the performance under pressure be very individual, be quite contextual. So some people we know, so Cam Redpath, has gone in and played at Twickenham in, the biggest game of his career, and he smashed it, and he's looked like he's pretty chilled. Now, maybe he's a little bit different inside and he's got some stuff that helps him. Other people less so. So my view is that, and Fletch will probably answer the big picture stuff, we would have had some kind of big picture stuff around England first, and then it would be individualized, but that would never be a psychologist and a group of players in a workshop. That would be integrated across. Everyone would know really, and I think the best I've seen it done would be the case formulation stuff, which I'm sure Fletch can explain way better than me. But
of course he can.
And
let me just pick a little bit
with the development plan as well. So it would be part of the development plan.
I was going to ask you that question. So you mentioned sort of well-being and performance under pressure stuff. I've been very lucky enough to watch you guys coach an awful lot and see you off the pitch as well as on the pitch. So I know what you do, but were you consciously working around protecting the well-being of all the performers? Was it conscious behavior, or is that just you as guys? So was there a plan in the development plan for you guys as coaches to consider the well-being or part of your team?
I'm sure Fletch will have some answers, but I would say yes. And part of our development as coaches, so might be, so if I give you a good example, would be Fletch spending time with the people least like him. So actually, A, that's beneficial to John Fletcher, but B, that's beneficial to the 3 lads who come into an England camp and are less likely to have a interaction with the then head coach. And I'm not saying that but clearly they would want to feel like they belong and they're valued, and that would be an important part of we're human beings. We want to belong to stuff. So if and having experienced this as a player, where you go into an environment and you don't feel like you belong, then I'm unlikely to be my best, and I'm unlikely to feel that good about it. And it could have been so simple for a coach to have actually given me some time.
Yeah.
Good answers.
Good answers.
What do you got, Fletch? Sorry, mate. I was just
No, man. I think you
throwing stuff
said it.
over.
I said it more. It's, look, I think some sports, I think rugby's miles behind, really, around that psychological support. Still, we're still sort of playing at it a bit. Lots of coaches think they're pseudo psychs. Lots of coaches will be really strong in this area. I think my understanding of psych, it's involved in everything because it's brain. So it's your mind. It's the function of the mind, especially around your behaviors. So I think it's really important that you get support psychologically within your program. We were fortunate that we had some, Matt Tormes, Belly, we had some people before that who were looking to support us. I think it's important that they work through coaches a bit and with coaches also, as well as a player. Often the coach is the one that's getting in the way, quite frankly, sometimes, in terms of what you say and how you say it and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, I think it's important to have a framework. Like, what's the stuff that's important to you? Get some, like, the foundation stuff in earlier. We were fortunate that, as you know, Duff, so we had cards. So that kind of influenced us around that. But if you want to build awareness and develop decision making, and especially around the resilience and type stuff, that actually the psychological is a big part of that. But yeah, you're right. If sports are really serious about it, they get into case formulation, which is basically working with the individual. And it would be all aspects of their development, but psych would be a pretty...
I mean, we all travel to lots, hundreds of clubs and schools around the country, around the world. And I think the game lends itself to subconsciously the coaches and the people involved delivering a careful practice or a careful sort of interaction. But I do think we could be more purposeful around it and deliberate with our thoughts around supporting people and the preparation. It's an interesting question.
What I would say is, the reality is, unless you become curious and start asking them about it, then how do you know what's in their head, quite frankly? And unless you build trust, they're never going to tell you. So there's some stuff, in my opinion, that would come before it. And, we always talk, the questions such as, what one thing would help me coach you better? What makes you wobble? Tell me about when you were, coaching or playing at your best. What type of things? How could I support you today? Just starting to get into. And then the other thing that has been remarkable, and I don't know if Fletcher's felt this as well, but during lockdown, I've done podcasts with players that I coached ages ago, and the podcast almost gave me permission to ask some of those questions, to be honest, and also actually probably gave me a solid hour and a half with them as well. So I've really enjoyed that as a way of, and I know a couple of coaches I know have used that and started to do like internal podcasts for their clubs or their universities that have just started to get, more curious about.
Yeah, you guys know, we've got a great relationship and I love the card stuff. But my point being is every coach, or at least every team manager or every head coach in the community game in the RFU should have a pack of cards. Should be able to be prompted a bit more around the psych, which, by the way, you said, Fletch, and referenced earlier, enables everything else. Whether that be performance or whether that be the person in the shirt, whether that be the club culture, the team culture, that would be the sort of catalyst for me and the driver to delivering, a good experience.
Yeah, Duff, so if you let me share my screen, mate, I'll show you a couple of things from other environments.
I'll let you do that now. Not a problem. I just want to ask you a question. Stop video. Make host. I want to ask you a question about how do you, Wynan has asked it in the chat box, around how do you deal with the expectations, the Maverick expectations of the Magic Academy? So do you feel like there's any expectation for you guys to constantly keep getting better, or is it just an inner burn?
One must answer that, mate.
I don't understand. What's the question, Duffs?
So do you feel a weight of expectation? The expectation around the Magic Academy being Mavericks, being sort of leaders in their field, slightly going off the session plan into other stuff?
Yeah, no, not really. I think, it's interesting, isn't it? Because people often say, it's a bit out of the box. Like we did that session at Brighton Football Club, I think it was, and they were like, yeah. And someone like, when do you do the normal stuff? I was like, okay. So I guess it's kind of trying to work out where people are. But yeah, I mean, look, I would want to get better all the time. So I got a lot of bookmarks saved. I get sent lots of stuff by people. I read it. I speak to players. I speak to coaches. Every mentor or coaching interaction is two-way. I am learning all the time, and I just want to be the best coach I can be, really. I'm gagging to get on the pitch, of course, like everyone else, and try it all out in 10 minutes.
Yes, yeah, look, I don't see myself as a maverick, really. I just see myself as trying to create an environment where I encourage people to be themselves and to try stuff, and then go from there. To me, that's the starting point, So the starting point to me is take some time to understand the person, let them go and try some stuff, and then let's now crack on. That's kind of what I thought. I mean, look, it's a really old saying, just treat people how you want to be treated yourself. How would you want people to coach your kids? Again, I think I'm fortunate. I had like an amazing experience as a young person. It became less amazing, actually, like the better I became and the more formal the environments. My experience of England A wasn't that strong. It was way off my experience with Northumberland County or with Tynedale or with the North of England type stuff. It was, I've always found that weird, and that's obviously stuck with me. Like, these, as Rusty used to keep on saying to us, like all the time, Fletcher, these are the best players in the country. We should be stretching them even more. And he's absolutely right, and stop copying people. I've always felt that I would want people to look in. I think it's a good measurement that you're doing some good stuff. So are people phoning up Sedbergh and going, what are you guys doing? Or they like, we wouldn't mind coming and sort of having a look. That to me is a good measurement. And yeah, we were delighted that lots of people were curious and coming in. And then also it was definitely magnifying when Rusty came in. Definitely get like these people into your environments, these naive experts to give you feedback. You can very quickly just start to sort of believe your own press a bit, and especially after W's. Mate, it was 3 years before we lost a game. I mean, we won something like 20 odd on the bounce. It was just ridiculous in terms of where England were compared to everybody else in the world, really. But people clearly come and have a look and they copy a bit. So can you evolve? Mate, this is just a couple of bits from Sunderland. A good friend of mine, guy I used to coach rugby, Greg Irvin, sent it to me. So they have a really strong framework around their psych support, and it's integrated with their coaches. You'd probably suggest that that's still a work in progress, but I just love what they do. And then there's a lot more detail that sits behind it. But I just love this powers concept, problem solving, ownership. I love that weapon awareness. I mean, what a great way, watch your weapons type stuff.
Call of Duty.
Yeah, mate, it's just class. And yeah, and then what supports that is around the person. So leadership, collaboration, communication, leadership. I think it's a really strong framework, but I think lots of environments have some strong frameworks around their side stuff. I think rugby's, is getting better, but I think other sports, especially the Olympic individual sports, probably do it better than team sports, professional team sports. I still think there's a stigma attached to it. I still think people think if you see in a psych that it's a problem.
Well, Alex has brought changing minds in, pretty sharpish at Sale, hasn't he? And I know Wasps have been using Chris Marshall, who was in at the FA, to support their coaches and some of their players. So be earning his coin at the moment.
Well, yeah, it's your brain, it's your mind. It's your function of your mind, and it controls everything. So it actually controls your catch and your kick and your pass. And why wouldn't you want to better understand it, want some support? Why isn't it seen like a goal kicking coach? This is adding real value. Again, I'll go back to it. I still think there's a stigma attached to air psychs. Now, it partly is down to them in terms of how they've behaved in the past. They're sometimes they're being used that they're correcting faults and they're doing workshops and stuff that's not that helpful, really. However, there's some amazing psychs. I mean, Rusty, some of the conversations we've had were Belly and Elliot and and Suzanne.
Suzanne.
Like it's life changing, quite frankly.
Because they simplify it. So I mean, the classic was Elliot. I think you were there, Fletcher, Loughborough, and I was like, mate, like, give me 3 headlines around the teenage brain, and he just went, 1, it's really normal. I was like, that's a good start point for a father of a teenage boy. So I appreciate that. 2, they care what their peers think, so just real simple stuff that I think the same as coaches, like the best people simplify stuff. Fletcher would be like really good at simplifying stuff. That's really helpful.
My question to be was, what split do you think it is at the moment? So in terms of like the psych, mental skills. So if I'm a coach at Tynedale, Fletch, what do you think the general split is around mental skills as opposed to rugby skills?
Well, in terms of what's delivered now?
Yeah, and what do you think a good balance would look like?
Oh, look, I think it's always, very rarely is it one or the other. So the psychological stuff is always a consideration. It's in every interaction you have with the kid because it's impacting on their psychological state. I mean, I'm fortunate, Tynedale. Like I hang with some amazing people. Most of them dads, played a bit. The vast majority, some mums played a bit. So some haven't, but they're just generally good people who want the best for other people, and they make good coaches and psychology. However, I think the point is, I think generally we could all as coaches be a little bit better informed around the psychological stuff. Have a framework in our head that is like, so to me it would start around the brain, understand how the brain works. It's really it's an interesting. So what's going to happen when you get upset type stuff, or what's going to upset you? So just have like a basic framework. How are people going to react under some form of pressure? How are people going to hang with each other? There's loads of type stuff. But that's what I would do. I think every sort of club should have a look. England only employ 1 psych in the whole program. There's no psychological support now in the pathway. England, is it only 1 with the England seniors, Rusty?
Andrea, yeah.
Is she full time?
Pretty fullish time.
Okay, but there isn't anybody else. So the governing body like England, I mean, they employ almost a full time psych.
I think that answers a question. One of the guys has asked you around why do you think the RFU are where they are in terms of their investment and development of the psych and the sport? So that answers that one. But a really good question followed up by Robert is clear differences between men and women. Have either of you guys had much interaction with elite women in sport and difference in psych?
I thought you were going to say to Fletcher, either of you had interactions with women.
Yeah, I've coached Northumbria women a bit. I've done lots of sessions. I haven't coached a team over a period of time that's been female. I've worked with Sarah Keller, who's an outstanding coach and a real strong ambassador for women in sport. Is there a difference in terms of coaching girls to boys? Yeah, I think there's some, without trying to be, and you've got to be really mindful that you don't just throw like these general things away. But what I've noticed, my experiences were girls ask more questions generally. So they would want more information. They'd want a bit more certainty generally, not every girl, obviously. They're less likely to give it a go. And then, and they would find it more difficult to call each other out. That's the stuff I've noticed from on grass. So you'd spend you would consider how much information and how you want to give them the information. That's the stuff I've noticed. I haven't done a huge amount. What about you, Rusty?
I like Max Caldas' story. He coached the Dutch women and they won Olympic gold. And then he went to the men's program and he said, he'll get on a call like this and he'll go, come on, write in the chat box characteristics of men and then write in characteristics of women. And he'll go, that's just not true. I coached those women and they were driven. They worked hard. They challenged each other. They challenged me. They got on with stuff. They were, I coached those men 6 months later. They were, they didn't challenge each other. They weren't driven. They didn't understand what it, So I think it's really individual. But my experiences, I guess, like Fletch would be, my favourite, second favourite now after Bermuda coaching experience was the 18 girls in the European sevens, and they were tough. Like they made it hard for me, but in the same, they were like, why do you want us to play like this, Rusty? Like, hang on, da da da. And my sense is that often the boys might go, well, we'll just do that because that's how things roll around here. But I love coaching them. What I would say is I would have found it tougher to coach them for a year, would be my guess. Because, yeah, they were really tough for me.
Yeah, I think the key to women's sport is that we need more role models in coaching who are female. So, and I know me and Rusty are involved in lots of female programs now around coach mentoring and coach support, and we need to continue to encourage and create environments where females feel safe to come and get involved in coaching, because that's probably the biggest thing that I think needs to happen, is that there needs to be more female coaches, female role models. And I just think it's brilliant. It's amazing what's currently happening on the TV now. It's completely normalized. So my kids, my father-in-law made a bit of a comment around who was sort of commentating on the games, and so my kids kind of looked at him and go, "What are you going on about?" It was like, it's just completely normal now in terms of the diversity that's involved in sport. And I just think it's amazing. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's the best thing that's happening to sport. So hats off to what's happening around the media and the TV stuff, because I think it's going to have a massive influence.
It's Sam Beckett, just to move on, and some really good points, and thanks. And it does highlight a clear difference around the male-female stuff. Sam Beckett, now, being a Sedbergh boy, he shouldn't be tuning in on Wednesday night to your guys. But I've noticed on Twitter he does like a lot of the Magic Academy stuff. Informal, formal sort of mental skills. And I think that's more, we've talked about this quite a bit in the past around rigid plans. So, prescribing everything for the players as opposed to just giving them a little bit of freedom and relaxing. What's your thoughts on, being flexible with the organisation of, what kit you turn up in, what kit gets laid out for you? It's all really high sort of structure stuff. Any thoughts?
We were just chatting. I chatted to Steph Jones earlier. He was talking about the scene in the basketball thing with Phil Jackson. But it feels like in another lifetime, that one. And someone put it in the chat box, please. And he was talking about who's the Maverick player. So he walked, Dennis Rodman disappeared for like 10 days, rocked up, no one batted an eyelid. Like, how many environments were you in as a player where Dennis Rodman would have survived? I wasn't in many, quite frankly. And the stuff from the kind of everybody's game stuff was like, just hearing people say I wasn't able to be myself is heartbreaking, quite frankly. So I guess we often associate that with elite, like what we're wearing, what time we are. Are we 15 minutes early? Are we? And maybe that's not what elite is. Maybe as Bob Muir said, what does elite mean? Does it just mean they dress better? My preference would be like help people find a way, give them a chance at the start, and if they need some support, then they need some support and some scaffold, and everyone's individual. Would I have thought like that all the time? No. I've definitely evolved my thinking on it.
Yeah, shame. I think if you're not careful, you just end up this beigeness. You're not actually, high performance elite stuff, you are dealing with outliers basically. However, our systems, this would be maybe one around the talents. I'm not sure if this came out when we talk about the talent. Often our talent systems are not allowing our outliers to flourish. And quite frankly, that's what goes on and wins your stuff. Often, not necessarily all the time. But if you're not careful, you're kind of always going on this beige thing. I agree with Rusty. It's got to be more individuals. You've got to allow outliers to flourish, because the there's a reason why they're outliers and they're doing so well. It's because they behaved in a different way.
Fletcher, I didn't listen to the James Bailey podcast, but he spoke about, like, he was in coaching meetings. He was told by coaches that, like, some of this stuff he was doing, like, because he really liked music, and that was not helping with selection. It's like how's that even relevant to selection?
Well, it was. Remember what Dave Flatman said when we did that podcast last week, when he said, the fact that I like cars and I drove up in a flash car, I think it influenced some of the perceptions and ultimately the decision around selections. Now, why wouldn't you just find out that he loves cars and just go and have a chat with him about his car? And isn't it amazing? I also remember Olly Morris, who I'm delighted now he's starting to really flourish at Worcester, 2 tries in 2 games.
Got an interception.
Got an interception. He is king of intercepts. But I can remember him talking about, like, the Gloucester lads do this thing where they like shave everybody's head and everybody thinks it's amazing. He goes, I just wouldn't be I wouldn't be involved in that club. They're like, there's no way I would shave my hair. It's like, why can't you just treat me because I want long hair? Like, why am I being judged?
Paolo Adogwe was talking about it, wasn't he? There's a bit of hype around him being in the England team, and rightly so. But he was talking about, he felt like he was shackled with a lot of stuff, even his hair. Like, he wouldn't ever dream of colouring his hair. And
couldn't be himself. How sad is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's a good look. Yeah, and it's just obviously, clearly it's not the fact that there's no rules and there's anarchy, but you need to be really smart and really clever, because, like, the outliers sometimes sit outside the beigeness of what performance sport is, not bringing out the best of the outliers. Because that's what often people are. They are outliers. They sit outside systems because they systems can't. You can't write a system for all these outliers type stuff. But you've got to be smart about it.
I think we've got a couple of Broughton Park coaches on tonight with Higgy and Tim. We've definitely got a couple of outliers at Broughton Park. And mate, it's just a club full of them.
Higgy was an outlier, mate. Higgy was. I played against Higgy. He was like a phenomenal player. He was an outlier. If he could have had his time again and with maybe a different attitude, then the kid might have played for England.
Oh, mate, I told the story this weekend. Like, he was the one that inspired me from the front row to the centre.
Fletch, you said he was an outlier because he never passed.
Yeah, he passed. He was really skillful. But, like, people would have taken a look at him. I got a story. A guy called Paul Winter. He ended up playing for England Colts eventually. So he went to England training thing. Well, this was back in the day when they did these trialy stuff, and the second day was fitness. But the first day he sort of rocked up, and he wasn't in great. Well, he didn't look as though he was in great shape. And they basically give you some, like, kit at the end of the day as like a award, and they didn't give him his. And he was like, well, why haven't you given it? I said, you're an absolute disgrace. Pretty much that's what they said to him. He ended up doing the fitness. He was the fittest prop there. He was definitely the best prop. He was definitely the best player. He ended up playing for England, and the fair play, they came and, like, they apologised. Our perceptions of you were based upon, what we sort of looked at type stuff. You've got to be really mindful around your systems. Like, they're not like, are they helpful for people like Higgy and other people who are quite frankly
anybody in? Yeah.
Don't put people in boxes. And I know we used to work with somebody who used to love a box. Like stop putting people in boxes. And I know you often have a framework within a triangle, but, like, that shouldn't represent your thinking of what this is going to look like. That's not what it is.
Fletch, Rusty, we are 1 minute over, which I don't think is too bad. And we didn't get onto our third topic, which was some positional stuff. But I think there's a great deal of content.
Fletch loves positional stuff.
So there's only 4 positions, mate.
He loves telling everyone what they should be doing.
Front row, back row of this, back 5, inside backs, outside backs.
You want to quickly share, mate? Can you have a minute to share his philosophy on the positional stuff? Because we were almost press ganged into writing a positional profiling document for every single individual player.
I did it on the level 3.
And what's your view on it, Fletch?
Oh, look, it's just nonsense, because it's just not true, is it? You always get people who sit outside. And now you might have some principles, and you might understand the game metrics currently, and you might future-proof it a little bit where you think the game might go. So that stuff might be handy. But to me, like, obviously, kids should play in all like different positions and swap positions in games. That's actually what some people are not doing. They're going, oh, well, this week you play there and that week play there. No, play them in 2 or 3 positions in that game so they can get so the brain can understand what's the difference playing blindside to open side in the same game. Like, why wouldn't you do that? And then at about 14-ish, 13, 14, like 15, sort of the in maturation, I think people are kind of going, oh, look, I wouldn't mind giving this a bit more of a go. And I would go front row, back 5 of the scrum, inside backs, outside backs. So we're talking about this now. So my little fella's under 13, so he'll be under the 14s next year. And that's what we're kind of, so we'll probably go like 75% they'll be in, sort of hanging around one of them, the other 25% then go and try some other stuff.
He's fly off and captain, isn't he, Ted? He's captain and he's goals.
I'm not sure actually. He just likes charging around. But yeah, that's the stuff around positional stuff. I think
it's class. It is good. I can't wait for us. Rusty, you mentioned it right at the beginning. I can't wait for us to get on a pitch and do some stuff around this.